now.
Yeah. Now, how did you so having worked in CENCOM for a short time, you're kind of compact in a small room. How did you handle like distancing, masking? What were some of the things you did to kind of keep everybody separated but working together? How about that?
That's a very good question. That was very difficult. I tossed around the idea, and I talked with my staff because they're in the room, they're there, and I have to heavily rely on them on their recommendation on things.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them about putting up a plexiglass or something between them, but no, they didn't really want that because they have to communicate, and they thought that would be hard. So we were mandated by the county to wear masks at some point. So for a while we did wear masks, but they knew that they had to stay the 6 feet apart, and that's what they did, and it worked out good.
Well, and I would think, again, if folks out there haven't been in the CENCOM center, the 911 dispatch center, there's 2 consoles right next to each other. And then there's like a third one kind of tucked into a corner.
It's more of an admin station.
Yeah. Now, did you utilize that at times to keep the dispatchers separated and all those things? Like, did that ever play into it?
We did. And that was an option that if they wanted to, they could go to that third workstation is what we call it, but most of them chose not to, just because they're like you said, there's the 2 stations there and another station. They like their own station. That's like their home when they're at work,
right.
And they chose to pick their station and sit at that station. Yeah. So they did have that choice, but most of them chose not to.
Sure. Well, let's dive into, Tony, this morning. We're going to talk, when folks call dispatch, they call the CENCOM center, what to expect when they make that call. So, just walk us through, initially what they're going to experience and why some of these things happen, why the questions they get asked, why the information that the dispatcher needs. How about that this morning?
Well, the most important thing, and the very first question they're going to be asked is their location, and of course that's important. We have to know where they're located to send the help, and sometimes that can be a challenge. You would think that, no, that's a pretty easy one. Well, not necessarily, because if you have someone traveling down the highway, like right out here at Route 51, you're not really paying attention. You're driving. You're not thinking all the time, where am I at? If something would happen, how would I report this? Now, we do have technology, our mapping system. We spend thousands of dollars on our mapping system and the 911 equipment that pulls that location data in, but still it's best to get the location from the caller.
Right.
And, we spend time on that. I was asking one of my dispatchers to write down a few things that I need to bring up today, and location was the biggest one. She said, make sure you tell them, we like to verify the location. We might ask you 3-4 times. Okay, so you're at this location. There's a reason why we're doing that. A, we want to verify it.
Yeah.
B, we want to make sure, we want to compare what the caller is telling us versus what the map is showing us.
Okay.
And so that's the most important thing. And then there's lots of questions. Once we get the location, we need to determine the level of response and what they're calling for. Is it a police emergency? Is it
a medical emergency,
or fire, those type of things? And then once we determine that, we have to determine what location, like which law enforcement agency do we send, which fire jurisdiction do we send, or EMS. So there's a lot of things going on, and we take a lot of heat for just send us help. Stop asking all these questions. A lot of times the caller won't even know that help has already been sent.
Right.
And as you know, the dispatcher, they have to multitask. I mean, they are talking to the caller, and at the same time it's going through their head. Okay, this is a City of Clinton call. This is a Wapella Fire District fire call. This is a Clinton County EMS call. So they have to determine all of that and then know which responders, which button to hit, and it's all electronic in the dispatch center. So there's a lot going on at that time, and help is most likely help is already being sent
Mhm.
as these questions are being
Yeah.
asked.
That multitasking piece was the biggest challenge I found. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand how much is going on just in a single call, whether not emergency, it's maybe there's a dispute amongst neighbors or something's happening at a grocery store or something of that nature. Like the multitasking for just a basic call, a non-emergency call is phenomenal. It's so challenging. And then you add an emergency where help is needed immediately. That adds to that stress. And I feel like people maybe lose sight of that sometimes when they're making those calls.
They do. And, and I tell my staff all the time, I appreciate the work that they do. And the citizens of DeWitt County also appreciate it, but they don't necessarily understand the job or the depth that we go in our job to figure calls out and the entire process. And it's a very important, the CENCOM 911 center is the hub of emergency services.
Yeah.
Everything starts there. And and yes, a lot of people, they don't understand, as there's 6 screens there in front of the dispatcher, and every one of those screens serve a purpose as to what goes on that screen, whether it's the mapping system or the 911 call taking equipment. It's not a phone sitting there that they just pick up and answer. It's all electronic. It's a computer screen sitting there that we use, and a lot of equipment behind the scenes that mainly that my job that I take care of. To make sure that it's all operational. But
Now, did you say so? The first in piece of information that dispatchers want is location. That's the number one thing. Now, did you say number 2 was which agency to respond to? Was that number 2, or was there another
number
one?
2 would be what type of call, what jurisdiction it is, or what discipline it is, whether it's police, fire, or EMS. That would be the second, so we can determine what the response is. And then third would be, yes, the geographical location as to which responder to send, whether it's Wapella Fire or Clinton Fire.
Anything else on that, Tony, you wanted to touch on? I've got a couple of things to throw at you if not.
Just real quick, deactivated cell phones. I like to talk about this a lot because people are misinformed when it comes to cell phones. A cell phone, whether it's active or not, well, of course, active can reach 911, but deactivated cell phone is the same manner. If the battery is charged, and a lot of people will give a cell phone to a child to play with, and I recommend against that unless you take the battery out, because that phone can still, if it's got a charged battery, it can reach 911. And that's always a challenge for us, because that location technology that I spoke about and the callback number is not always available for the dispatcher when that call comes in. So we spend a lot of time investigating those calls when we really shouldn't be.
Well, and I remember that was one of the frustrating parts of, sitting in with the dispatchers in training was, you'd get a call, there'd be no one on the other line. You have the capability to kind of pinpoint where that call is coming from. So you send an officer, you send someone to that location. Come to find out, it's like you said, kid playing with a cell phone or a butt dial, if you will, for lack of a better, professional term, I guess.
Yes, and we have those daily. We have numerous calls daily like that, and we always investigate those calls, because you never know.
Yes,
you never know
exactly.
what that call may be a real call. So, real quick, I know you've probably got to take a break, but if you accidentally call 911, just stay on the line. And we can take the call. Very likely we're still going to send someone out just to verify that call. But if someone calls and they realize they misdialed and they hang up, our job is very hard at that point, because we have a lot of work to do to try to determine where that call is coming from and why they called, and we end up chasing that call, and sometimes for a long period of time.
Sure. Would you like to speak to calling 911 for non-emergency situations?
Yeah, real quick. I gave this presentation to a group, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to discourage the use of 911. I'm not. But we only have a certain number of 911 lines, and we want those to be readily available for an emergency. And anytime someone calls and it's non-emergency, it's tying up that line. So, I gave this, and I said, anything that's an emergency to you, call 911. And we're going to tell you, okay, this is not this is not something you should be calling 911 on.
Mhm.
Just so you know, the dispatcher might go ahead and take the call real quick on that line, but rush that line clear,
Mhm.
or they may ask that person to hang up and redial the admin lines.
Yep, sure. So, Tony, let's take a time out here. Can folks learn more about CENCOM? Like, do you have a website? Do you have Facebook? Anything like that?
We do have Facebook. We're working on a website, but Facebook. It's CENCOM of DeWitt County.
Now, what do you put on there? Like, what do you use Facebook for?
Well, I'm getting ready to appoint someone to take care of that, but we'll put like just general 911 information on there, maybe some road closure or share certain things related to 911, those type of things.
Very good. Tony Harris, Director of CENCOM in DeWitt County, our guest in studio. More to come here on the WHOW Morning Show.
WHOW. Illinois Ag Better. Let's check the numbers now at the Chicago Board of Trade on this Thursday. I'm Jim Taylor for the RFD Radio Network. Corn higher, beans double-digit lower, and wheat trading steady at this hour. July corn, 746.5 up 6.5. September corn up 7 1/4, 607 1/4, and December corn 602 3/4. That's up 7 1/2. July beans 1561 3/4, down 26.5. August beans down 15. 1469 3/4, and November new crop 1332 1/4, down 17 1/4. July wheat currently 798 1/4, down 3 1/4. September wheat up 3/4, 811 1/2. December wheat 828 3/4, up a penny. August bean meal up $1, 438.20, and August bean oil 57.28, down $1.78. I'm Jim Taylor for the RFD Radio Network.
DeWittDailyNews.com is the area's leading local news source 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get the latest local news, obituaries, police blotter, weather forecast, and more with no paywall. Head to DeWittDailyNews.com to get the local information you need to know.
For the latest in Central Illinois agricultural news, visit IllinoisFarmRadio.com. Get updated information on markets, weather, ag news, local interviews with NAFB farm broadcaster Jared White, and much, much more. All at IllinoisFarmRadio.com.
Life is uncertain. Stop in and see me, State Farm Agent Jason France, on the west side of the Clinton Square, or click our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com and see how our full lineup of State Farm insurance and financial services can help protect your family.
Local farm broadcaster Jared White covers the local agriculture news you need to know. Hear his reports by downloading the free WHOW mobile app.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show is streaming to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Tony Harris is the director of CENCOM, my guest in studio for this morning. And, Tony, we talk about, when someone calls the dispatch center, they call whether it's 911 or they're just calling to have a complaint or have authority sent to a location for whatever reason. We talked about all the questions that are asked in there, and particularly location. I think that's self-explanatory. Why you're asking for that. You need to know where the help is being sent. But there's a lot of other questions that you ask, particularly about the individual on the line. You ask for a date of birth. You ask for a name. And I'm trying to rack my brain to remember what all you need from that individual. Why do you ask so thoroughly about that individual on the line?
Well, mainly when we ask information like that, it's going to be a law enforcement call, not necessarily always law enforcement call, but we ask that so we can make sure that we properly document that information in our record system, basically for if there's going to be a report generated by the police officer, then he has that information to do his report.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been times where, we haven't gotten the correct information, and through the entire record process, we maybe chose a wrong name in the system. And then, depending on the type of call and how far it goes through the court system or anything like that, it could result in a warrant being issued for the wrong person. Mm-hmm. So we've seen that happen. So we do try to verify names and dates of birth. Either it's a dispatch center or more likely it could be a law enforcement officer just to verify that they are dealing with this person and they know it's this person and not someone else.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that it just in that kind of that realm as well, a lot of people wonder why that information is needed, but there's also a security component for that and a safety component for the officer or the responding agency, whether it's EMS or fire, that it's kind of their safety comes into play from that perspective as well, correct?
It is because there's certain like houses, and not only collecting that information on a person, but we may collect that information also on a house or a structure. Does the structure have chemicals stored in it? So, or dogs that could be aggressive, things like that we want to know what we're dealing with, and we keep historical records on that so we can caution the responder on what they may be getting into.
Sure. I was telling you before we got started this morning, I was I don't want to say confronted, passing by a situation locally where the police were on scene for an issue, and they were asking the person that had made the call, they were asking them these questions: their name, their date of birth, their address, all of those things. And the woman said, "Why do you need this? We just want you to help us." And a lot of that, like from their perspective, and maybe this is a better question for Chief Lowers, but again, it goes back to that security for them. So they know who they're talking to. If there's, warrants for maybe a person that they're speaking with, they know, or maybe there's some tags associated with an individual, safety tags. They know that as well, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. And, most of it is for, yes, like you said, for safety reasons. So we know who we're dealing with, but a lot of it is for historical records, and not only historical records, but we need to make sure we know who we're dealing with when this particular incident evolves through the court system or whatever. We need to know make sure that's the person that we are dealing with.
Why is it so important to have updated information for individuals that maybe are calling, maybe at the scene of a response? Why is, you mentioned the court or the record keeping on those things. Why is that information, particularly from the individual standpoint, less about the CENCOM side, but that individual, why is that information so important?
Well, it's important because, it may not be real important at that time, but you wouldn't believe the times where we would have to go back and look at historical records on a person. It could be a call not even involving that person, but we need to make contact with that person, and it's an emergency. For just an example, we find a child that's wandering around, and someone tells us the mother of this child is so and so. Well, we in CENCOM can go back and look through our records and determine, okay, so that's the name we were given. Oh, I see this person, name, date of birth. We have a phone number. We call that person, and so a lot of it is historical records, and we could use that on a call that could be 10 years later, and locate a person for emergency purposes.
Yep, for sure. So, Tony, I know you want to get to a little bit on some other things here this morning. What else do you have for us today?
I think I mention this almost every time I'm here in the studio, and I appreciate the opportunity, but we need to make sure that the citizens of DeWitt County understand how important it is to put their address number on their house. That's very important. If the person would just think, if I need help, if I need fire, EMS, or police, how best am I to label my house with my address so they can see it from the street?
Right.
I would just ask that the homeowner just take a look at that, stand out by the street and look to see where their address is displayed. Can that emergency responder see my address, whether it's day or night? Where would it best be seen on my house? So that's important. We still have houses in the county, in the unincorporated area, and houses in the city of Clinton or the different villages throughout the county that's not got the house properly labeled with the address. And that's a challenge to the responder, when they're responding to that.
I know we'll talk next gen 911. That's been kind of your big focus the last 5 to 8 years or so. But I know prior to that, it was updating those addresses and that mapping system and making sure addresses matched with what was on the map, correct?
Yes. And there was a great deal of work that went into that. The state, I would say this, it was 2 years ago, the state developed guidelines and hired different personnel to help us through this on a state level, to get all the counties in the state of Illinois ready for next generation 911. And there's you mentioned the mapping. Yes, we had to revamp our entire mapping system with address points is what we call them, and supply those to the state for them to get ready for the development of next generation.
Oh, I didn't know that was like kind of a foundational thing for that.
It didn't used to be. I started, as you know, 5-6 years ago, I started talking to my board. I kept hearing chatter about this next generation 911. And I kept in the classes that I attended, you need to start preparing for this. So we started 5 or 6 years ago, and we're at the point now where the state is ready to develop their state level network, 911 network, which is going to revamp the entire way 911 is currently being managed.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tony, let's save that for our next visit, if that sounds good. Tony Harris is the director of CENCOM in DeWitt County. Tony, thanks so much for your time this morning. The morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton.
WHOW.
The Big 1520 WHOW Clinton, 92.3